Well, hello friends, it's Johnny Flyer, and the day has come that this armature, some of you may remember came out of the Alco Diesel, is going to get rewound, or at least it's going to make an attempt, or more properly, I'm going to make an attempt. So some of you may remember this armature was really rusted up and really corroded. And I wasn't honestly that sure I could save it to begin with, but I decided to take an opportunity to learn a little about these, and I'm going to give it a try and see what I come up with. It's only going to cost me just a little bit of magnet wire if it doesn't work, and a little bit of elbow grease to try to get these beads moving. You should remember these were frozen solid to the pole here, and the same on this end, just frozen, and a little bit of light lubing and some work to get it off. Now you may see the tool marks on there. Unfortunately, it's my best to try to protect them with some cloth, but at least initially, man, the torquing I had to put on these beads, and I'm sorry, I don't know the nomenclature just off the top of my head, but trying to get these to spin was not easy. So caused some damage to the beads, but overall, you can see it's actually not too bad. A few things I was a little worried about, so you can kind of see, let me see in here, no, it's this side, yeah, you can kind of see in there, this little flap there, I don't want to mess with it too much. There was a kind of a paper-like material, I guess, that was protecting the poles, I imagine, from the wire to make sure there wasn't any crossover of electricity, just a little bit extra insulation, and that's now all gone. And there was also, in fact, I'll take another one I got off of a online buy. I just got a mass buy of these. This is a smaller version. You can see it's essentially the same kind of armature, but it's a smaller version. And according to Mr. Barker's book, it's a rarer version, I guess, in certain versions. I imagine it may be an earlier one. I think the bigger posts and more wire. I think if using some rudimentary electrical engineering, of which I have none, but I imagine these were not as able to turn as strongly, and so you didn't get quite as good a pull. But anyway, I'm bringing this up because I wanted to show you all. You see there's kind of a little cloth or fabric up there at the top, which is I guess protecting the commutator from what potentially might fly off here, I guess, or maybe insulating the wires a little better. But for the most part, it follows, I think, the other armatures for the steam engines. We can see the epoxy in there, and I think this is the one you can kind of see the beginnings of the pigtail. I'll go back in there. So this one's in pretty good shape, and it's ready to go. I didn't have to do anything to it. I just cleaned off the commutator plates when I got it a little better. And this one's ready for an engine. I just have to get one. So here's what I got. This is 30 gauge magnet wire. And again, using Mr. Barker's book and the service manuals, took and stripped off the ends. You can kind of see in there. Stripped the ends of the insulating, so that red color, and got down to the copper and twisted it up pretty good, according to how he recommends. And then dipped it in epoxy. Let's see if we can get it focused a little bit there. It's kind of hard to focus. Anyway, you can see it's sort of got that sort of epoxy look on there. So dipped it in there. I've let it dry, and it's good to go. And that's going to form our pigtail. And I have 7.5 feet, 3 strands, 7.5 feet. You have to, if you're going to redo the armature, you have to do all 3 pulls at the same time. You can't just do 1 pull. So that's going to form our pigtail, and then we're going to go in I gotta go back and check my picture one more time, but I think we're gonna go in a clockwise fashion around the poles 3 different times. And as we try to knock it off the desk and make it unusable, then what we'll do when we finish up, I'll go double check again, but we're going to solder the free end to this piece up here. So we wrap it here, and we'll solder it here. Or to be more specific with it, use a tool instead of my finger. I'm gonna wrap here, and then we'll solder to the next one forward. And if all goes well, we should have a nice working armature. And I won't be able to show you step by step because I need both hands. But Looking forward to doing this because it's a great learning experience, and I think it's pretty cool. So wish me luck, keep your fingers crossed, folks, and I'll check in with you again when I got an update. Well, that's one down, and 55 wraps around that particular pole, and it looks like it tucked in pretty nicely. I think the trick here is just making sure you follow the instructions that a lot of the experts give, and using a blunt instrument. In this case, I just used the side of this screwdriver and really tamp down the sides here. You got to be careful, of course, that you don't want to scratch off the insulation, because then you end up with the same problem that you started with. But it looks like I went and took a harder look at the sister to this one right here, and actually for the diesels, instead of wiring it kind of in an advanced position, it looks like they wire it straight up to the commutator plate that's above it. So I'm going to do that. Keep my fingers crossed that I did this right, because I'm not interested in trying to wrap this thing again, and follow the lead of the this other one over here. So that's one down, 55 wraps. Let's see if I can do it again. Okay, folks, well, here's the end product right here. I haven't put any of the epoxy on it just yet. Hooked it up to test for a signal, and I have positive signal between all three plates, so that's a good sign. Not as good a sign was that I had some inconsistencies in the ohms, so I don't know, I may hedge my bets and see if that's just that's going to be a serious problem. It wasn't a big dip, but it was enough where it was noticeable. I think the difference was 1.2 versus 1.0 or 8.8. So I will, I think, keep my fingers crossed, because I really don't want to do that again. So these three are the lengths that were cut at each of the three lengths, and so even though the wrap numbers were different and diverged actually more than I thought they would, this is all that came off. So weight-wise, the amount of wire that's around each pole looks to be fairly consistent, you know, give or take a few centimeters here and there. But I wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit and just kind of show you. These were the tools I used for this. So screwdriver just to kind of tamp it down, some needle nose pliers to both cut and work a few things. I found that the tweezers here came in pretty handy. And of course my reference module here, and also used a little solder and soldering iron. So that's really all it took. And some of you, you may notice before I cut into this this take was I used a kind of a mock-up, whatever you want to call it, jig. That didn't work so well, so I ended up actually for the last about wrap and a half kind of holding on to it and wrapping it myself, which gave me a little bit more manual control, but man, it made my hands hurt. So there's probably a better way of doing that as well. But anyway, you can see it's now all soldered up. Solder probably needs to be polished up just a little bit, and just to make sure there's no rough edges on there. And then we need to put a little epoxy on there. So that's it, provided that the ohms difference doesn't cause a problem. So I think what I may do actually is, instead of going straight to the epoxy, I may give it a test run first, and if it runs fine, I'll epoxy it up and let it go. So that's armature winding, and I'm sorry I couldn't get a video of the winding itself, but trust me, it was very boring and rather tedious, and good thing I had some music to listen to here at the workbench, because man, that took a while. But worth the effort, and certainly worth the education, so that was certainly worth the time. And I do want to express my thanks to Mr. Barker for taking out time with me and emailing me back and forth to kind of give me some tips, as well as a few other folks out there who have YouTube videos and some other options that I've read and listened to. Very, very helpful. As a first attempt on an armature, I would say not actually as bad as I think some people make it out to be. You just have to be meticulous and protect your work. And I say this even understanding that this this armature may or may not be at 100% just yet, but wasn't terrible, but it was tedious, and you had to really kind of be careful with the wire. And of course, I really hate doing solder work, so you might be able to tell from the workmanship on the solder here was not so great. But just probably my least favorite part of working on these things. But even then, I still enjoyed myself. So we'll see if I can get it on an engine here pretty soon. The Alco Diesel that this came from is still not recovered completely. I have a few parts that I need to either manufacture myself or order, and we'll probably do that in short order and get this in there and see how well she performs, if at all. So that's it for Johnny Flyer today. Thanks for sticking with me, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.